All right, picture this. Crystal chandeliers dripping light like diamonds, the low hum of expensive chatter, champagne flutes clinking. It's one of those high society galas, the kind where millions are pledged before the appetizers even arrive. And there I am, in a gown that cost more than my annual salary. Well, my asterisk day job asterisk salary anyway. I'm mingling, smiling, playing the part of Alexandra Vance, enigmatic tech investor, the new darling of the city's elite. It's a world away from my other life. The one that starts at 5 a.m., smells faintly of bleach, and involves scrubbing toilets in a high-rise office building downtown. By day, I'm just Alex, the janitor, invisible, overlooked. The woman people barely glance at as they rush past, dropping coffee grounds or complaining about the overflowing trash cans. But by night, that's a different story. By night, thanks to a tech startup I co-founded years ago under a different name and then sold for a fortune most people only dream of, I'm living a life they can't even comprehend. Why the double life, you ask? Why scrub floors when I could be sailing yachts? Let's just say, I had my reasons. Reasons rooted in betrayal, in watching someone else take credit for my hard work, in seeing my family almost ruined. Reasons that led me straight to the cleaning crew of Sterling Enterprises, the very company run by the man who'd unknowingly set this whole bizarre play in motion. Mr. Harrison, Sterling III. Arrogant, dismissive, dripping condescension that was Sterling. He probably didn't even know my last name, just saw the help. And that's exactly how I wanted it. For 2 years, I lived this paradox. 5 days a week, I'd put on my worn-out uniform, punch the clock, and clean the offices of people who made more in an hour than I supposedly made in a week. I'd listen to their gossip, empty their bins filled with discarded million-dollar ideas and half-eaten gourmet lunches. I'd nod politely when they gave me curt instructions, their eyes glazing over me as if I were part of the furniture. It was humbling, yes. Infuriating, absolutely. Especially knowing the balances in my offshore accounts, but it was also informative. You learn a lot about people when they think you don't matter. You see the cracks in their perfect facades, hear the whispers they think no one can overhear. And I was waiting, patiently, for the right moment, the right leverage. My nights were my escape. Expensive dinners, strategic investments, building a new identity, Alexandra Vance. She was everything Alex the janitor wasn't. Confident, powerful, respected. I built connections, moved in circles Sterling could only dream of truly belonging to, all while remaining utterly anonymous to him in my other life. It was a tightrope walk, constantly managing the secrecy, the separate phones, the different wardrobes, the carefully crafted stories. Some days, the sheer exhaustion of it, the constant vigilance, almost broke me. Scrubbing grime off a CEO's bathroom floor while my stock portfolio surged felt surreal, almost comical if it wasn't so damn lonely. But the thought of Sterling, of what he'd done, kept me going. He thought he was on top of the world, untouchable. He had no idea the ghost of his past was polishing his mahogany desk every morning. Which brings us back to the gala. The culmination of years of quiet planning. I was there as Alexandra Vance, a major sponsor invited to the VIP section. I knew Sterling would be there. He never missed a chance to preen and network. I hadn't planned on revealing myself, not yet. My plan was more intricate, a slow burn. But sometimes, fate forces your hand. I was talking to a potential business partner, laughing at something witty he'd said when I felt eyes on me. I turned slowly, and there he was. Harrison Sterling III, standing not 10 feet away, a look of utter bewilderment dawning on his perfectly smug face. His eyes narrowed, flicking from my designer gown to my face, then back again. The cogs were turning, the vague familiarity, the face he saw every day, but never really looked at, suddenly clicking into place under the glare of 1,000 crystals. His jaw slackened slightly, the color drained from his face. He knew. He recognized me, Alex, the janitor, standing there looking like $1 million actually, considerably more. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't how I imagined it. It was too soon, too public. But his eyes locked with mine, a mixture of disbelief and dawning fury swirling within them. The low hum of the party seemed to fade. It was just him and me, the janitor and the millionaire, locked in a silent, shocking moment of recognition that felt like an eternity. The mask was off. The game had just changed, and I had no idea what he would do next. His mouth opened, then closed again. Harrison Sterling, a man rarely lost for words, especially cutting ones, looked utterly poleaxed. You could practically see the error messages flashing behind his eyes. Asterisk does not compute. Janitor. Gala. Designer gown. Impossible. He took a hesitant step forward, his gaze still locked on mine, a predator uncertain if its prey was suddenly holding a bazooka. The air crackled. The potential business partner I'd been speaking with glanced between us, sensing the sudden, inexplicable tension. "Harrison," I said, my voice cool, betraying none of the adrenaline suddenly coursing through my veins. I gave him the same polite, slightly distant nod I gave him every morning when he strode past my cleaning cart without a second look. That simple act, that familiar yet completely out of context acknowledgement, seemed to snap him out of his stupor. Disbelief morphed into outrage, tinged with deep personal offense. How dare the help infiltrate his world? You! He sputtered, his voice low and venomous, taking another step closer, ignoring the people around us. "What in God's name are you doing here? Dressed like asterisk that asterisk? Did you steal that dress? Did you sneak in?" The accusations were ludicrous, dripping with the same casual disdain he showed me every day, but now amplified by sheer shock. If you've ever been utterly underestimated, looked down upon, treated like dirt beneath someone's expensive shoes, you'll understand the feeling that surged through me then. It wasn't just anger. It was a cold, hard clarity. This man who built his empire on stepping stones, made of other people's dreams, including my family's, couldn't fathom a reality where the woman scrubbing his toilets could possibly belong in the same room as him as an equal, let alone a superior. Why was I even there, scrubbing his floors? Years ago, my father ran a small, innovative software company. We were on the verge of a breakthrough. Sterling, then a ruthless up-and-comer, saw an opportunity. Through lies, legal maneuvering, and exploiting a trusted employee, he essentially stole our core technology, bankrupted my father's company, and launched Sterling Enterprises using our intellectual property as his foundation. My father was broken, financially and emotionally. We lost everything. The shame, the stress. It contributed to his early death a few years later. I vowed then that somehow, someday, Sterling would pay. Not just financially, but he'd understand the humiliation, the feeling of being powerless. The janitor job? It started as a desperate measure after a series of setbacks following my father's death. The only thing I could get quickly, but then I realized it was the perfect Trojan horse, a way to get inside, to observe, to wait. And while I cleaned, I coded. Nights, weekends, any spare moment. I poured my grief and anger into building something new, something better under a completely separate identity, Alexandra Vance. I partnered with a brilliant coder I met online, secured angel investment, and we built the tech startup that eventually made me wealthy beyond my wildest dreams, all while wearing a janitor's uniform 5 days a week. The disrespect I endured daily was staggering. Sterling wasn't just dismissive, he was cruel in a casual, thoughtless way. He'd drop trash right next to the bin and sneer, "That's what you're paid for." He'd loudly complain about the quality of service, if there was a single smudge on a window. He once spilled hot coffee on the floor near me and didn't even apologize, just barked, "Clean that up before someone slips." My coworkers, many of them immigrants working multiple jobs, faced similar treatment. We were invisible, interchangeable, subhuman in his eyes. There were days I wanted to scream, to throw the mop bucket at his tailored suit, to tell him exactly who I was, but I held back. Patience, strategy, the long game. Sterling's voice snapped me back to the Gala. "Security!" he hissed, looking around wildly. "There's an imposter here. This woman works for the cleaning crew in my building." A few heads turned. My business acquaintance looked mortified. This was escalating faster than I'd anticipated. Sterling was trying to humiliate me, to have me thrown out like trash, reinforcing his worldview where janitors belonged, scrubbing floors, not sipping champagne. He was doubling down on his arrogance, blinded by his prejudice. He genuinely believed I couldn't possibly belong there legitimately. He thought he had all the power. He thought I was just some insignificant speck he could crush. But as he frantically signaled for a security guard, his face red with fury, I saw something else flicker in his eyes. A tiny seed of doubt, a sliver of fear. Maybe, just maybe, things weren't as they seemed. And that's when I knew. My intricate slow burn plan was obsolete. This public confrontation, this very moment of his arrogant disbelief, this asterisk, was the opportunity. He'd handed it to me on a silver platter. A wave of calm washed over me. The fear evaporated, replaced by icy resolve. He thought he was exposing me? He had no idea. I met his furious gaze, and for the first time, I didn't look away. I didn't lower my eyes like the janitor he expected. I held his stare, and a small smile played on my lips. Let him call security. Let everyone watch. The show was about to begin, and he wasn't the director anymore. The security guard, a burly man in a stiff suit, approached cautiously, clearly uncomfortable intervening at such a high-profile event, but responding to Sterling's frantic gestures. "Sir, is there a problem?" he asked, his eyes flicking between a furious Sterling and me, standing there calmly in my expensive gown. "A problem?" Sterling scoffed, puffing out his chest, regaining some of his bluster now that authority seemed to be on his side. "This woman is trespassing. She's a janitor in my building. She has no business being here. Escort her out immediately." He practically spat the word janitor, as if it were the foulest insult imaginable. The guard looked at me, then at my VIP lanyard, then back at Sterling, confused. The small crowd that had gathered murmured. My potential business partner discreetly tried to edge away. This was it, the moment of truth. Deep breath. I turned slightly, addressing not just Sterling, but the onlookers, my voice clear and steady, carrying easily over the sudden hush. "Mr. Sterling is correct about one thing," I began, my smile widening slightly. "I do indeed work as a janitor at Sterling Enterprises." Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Sterling smirked, vindicated. "See, throw her out." But I wasn't finished. "I find it gives one a unique perspective on the inner workings of a company. You learn so much when people think you aren't worth noticing." I paused, letting that sink in, my eyes finding Sterling's again. His smirk faltered. "For instance," I continued, my tone becoming sharper, "you learn about certain discrepancies. about deals made in hushed tones, about intellectual property that mysteriously resembles technology from a small startup that went bankrupt years ago after a hostile takeover. Sterling's face went from red to ghostly white. He knew exactly what I was talking about, the foundation of his entire empire. The ghost wasn't just polishing his desk. She was about to rattle his chains in public. What? What are you talking about? He stammered, trying to regain control, but his voice lacked conviction. This is slander. She's clearly delusional. Am I? I raised an eyebrow. Or am I Alexandra Vance, the founder and former CEO of Nexus Innovations, the company whose core technology Sterling Enterprises acquired under questionable circumstances? The same Alexandra Vance who, after selling Nexus for a rather significant sum, decided to take a closer look at Mr. Sterling's operations from the ground up. The silence was absolute. You could hear a pin drop. People stared, mouths agape, connecting the dots. Alexandra Vance, the mysterious tech millionaire they'd been reading about, the Gala's sponsor, was the janitor? Sterling looked like he'd been physically struck. His carefully constructed world was imploding right before his eyes, in front of his peers. And tonight, I added, turning towards the event organizer who was now hovering nearby, looking horrified. As a major sponsor of this wonderful charity, I was planning on announcing a significant contribution. I named a figure, a number so large it drew another collective gasp, easily dwarfing any pledge Sterling might have made. However, I locked eyes with Sterling again, my voice dropping slightly, filled with ice. Given Mr. Sterling's inhospitable behavior and his rather public accusations, perhaps I should reconsider where my philanthropic efforts are best placed. Maybe towards funding legal aid for entrepreneurs dealing with predatory business practices? The implication was clear. The threat hung heavy in the air. Sterling staggered back a step, speechless, his face a mask of disbelief, fury, and utter panic. The security guard quietly melted back into the crowd. My former business acquaintance suddenly looked very interested again. The power dynamic had shifted, irrevocably and spectacularly. Sterling wasn't just facing a janitor anymore. He was facing the woman whose life he'd ruined, now armed with wealth, influence, and the one thing he feared most, the truth. He opened and closed his mouth like a fish, but no sound came out. His reputation, meticulously crafted over years, was shattering around him. People were whispering, pointing, their expressions ranging from shock to pity to outright contempt for him. He looked utterly broken. Seeing him there, stripped bare of his arrogance, I didn't feel triumph, not exactly. More like closure. A quiet satisfaction that the scales were finally brutally balanced. I gave him one last look, a look that said, I remember everything, then turned my back on him, leaving him standing alone amidst the wreckage of his own making. I addressed the organizer with a warm smile. Now, about that donation. The party continued, but the energy had changed. I was no longer just Alexandra Vance, enigmatic investor. I was the woman who'd been the janitor, the woman who'd played the long game and won. The next Monday, I didn't put on the janitor uniform. Instead, I walked into Sterling Enterprises in a power suit, not as Alex the janitor, but as Alexandra Vance, representing a newly formed consortium that had just initiated a majority shareholder buyout, facilitated by information I discreetly gathered over 2 years. Sterling was summarily dismissed, his downfall swift and complete. Was it revenge? Maybe partly, but mostly it was justice. For my father, for my family, for every person he'd ever underestimated or trampled on. Sometimes the best way to clean up a mess is from the inside out, and sometimes The person holding the mop holds more power than you could ever imagine. Phew.